"I'm a wizard," this kid shouts, fully committed to the role. His friend plays along, claiming to be a monster that eats wizards for breakfast. He's got his makeshift wand ready for battle. She suddenly gets a sharp whack on the head. She not happy about it, complaining that monsters are supposed to lose, not get hit for real. They keep bickering about the rules while an old man watches from the side. Elder Ravis greets them, clearly amused by their morning energy. The kids immediately ask him what they need to do to become real wizards. He explains that wizards are the peak of humanity, born with powers inherited from their ancestors. But unfortunately, it's not something these kids can just choose to become. A villager steps up, asking the elder if the rumors are actually true. Word has gotten out that a monster appeared near the village entrance. Ravis confirms it. The beast was spotted just last night. It's a massive leopard, as big as a house and covered in pitch-black shadows. The village chief is already on his way to the city to hire a professional wizard. Knowing help is coming is a huge relief for the locals. The mother comforts her kid, warning him to stay out of the forest for now. Without magic, taking down a beast like that is pretty much impossible. Everyone in town is taking the threat seriously. Ravis asks if the shepherd knows about the danger yet. Way up on Hisaril Hill, the world feels a lot further away. Turan is just lying there, looking completely bored with life. He spends most of his time alone out here with his flock. He's been solo for so long he's starting to think he'll forget how to talk. He senses someone approaching and peeks an eye open. It's Ravis, calling him a slacker for resting before the sun even sets. Turan doesn't have time for manners and just tells the old man to move out of the light. The elder asks if he's still holding a grudge over that old incident. Turan remembers it well. The time the village tried to steal his mother's sheep. He's not exactly in a sharing mood with people who tried to rob his inheritance. Ravis loses his temper, calling him a disrespectful brat. Turan just gives him a flat look, totally unimpressed by the outburst. The old man sighs and finally gets to the point. A monster has appeared. He's making his rounds, warning everyone after a leopard was found nearby. Turan keeps petting his sheep, not showing a single hint of fear. Ravis tells him the chief is getting help, so just try to stay safe for now. Despite all the attitude, the old man admits he was actually worried about him. Turan turns away, telling him to stop being dishonest and just admit he's worried about the sheep. He finishes the roast by telling the elder his breath is rotting his nose. Ravis huffs and heads back, leaving the shepherd to his solitude. Turan's gaze sharpens as he watches the old man leave. He knows the reality. If humans have wizards, beasts have monsters. Turan continues his walk, thinking about the rumors. A wizard is actually coming to this backwater village just because of a monster. He looks over his sheep, a bit skeptical about the whole thing. He knows that if it's just a local chief calling them, there's a good chance they won't be anyone special. Still, a part of him is curious. He wants to see a wizard in person just to find out how strong they really are. Suddenly, he stops in his tracks, his nose twitching as he catches a scent. His gaze sharpens instantly. That metallic smell, he knows exactly what it is. It's blood, he mutters, his casual attitude disappearing in an instant. The sun begins to set, casting long, dark shadows over the forest path. He picks up the pace, his sandals crunching against the dirt as he heads toward the smell. He pushes through the dense trees, certain that he's heading in the right direction. His expression is grim. Something about the intensity of the scent feels very wrong. He rounds a corner, his pace slowing as he spots something on the ground ahead. He comes to a dead halt, staring down at the grisly scene before him. It's Ravis. The old man is lying motionless on the ground, surrounded by a pool of dark red. Turan looks down, a bitter thought crossing his mind. The elder told him to be careful, yet he was the one who rushed in first. Turan looks down at the brutal wound. He can tell right away this isn't from any ordinary animal. Seeing the shredded mess, he knows for a fact that a monster did this. Suddenly, he senses something and looks up. A massive, armored claw slams into the dirt. Out of the shadows emerges a beast covered in stone-like scales and glowing with a sinister yellow energy. Turan watches as the predator steps into the light. The panther-like monster towers over him, letting out a low, menacing growl. Meanwhile, back in the village, a young boy asks if adults are really helpless against these things. His father admits they're just too strong for normal people to fight. He sets down a plate of food, telling the boy not to worry. Apparently, the village chief has already gone to get a wizard for protection. The boy looks up hopefully, wondering if a wizard will really be able to punish the monster. His father smiles, explaining that wizards are great beings born with the power of magic. Back in the woods, the monster lets out a roar that shakes the trees. Turan doesn't look bothered at all, keeping a steady gaze on the beast. He speaks a single command, testing his strength. The creature lunges, closing the distance in an instant. It snaps its jaws, ready to tear him apart. Turan stands his ground, waiting for the attack to connect. He looks surprised when his command doesn't seem to have any effect. The beast leaps again, its body crackling with energy. Turan tries again, shouting for it to stop. It doesn't work. The monster continues its charge, tail whipping through the air. He figured killing it wouldn't be that simple, but he didn't expect it to be immune to being frozen either. The beast slams its paws down, creating a shockwave of yellow light. It snarls, its multiple eyes glowing as it prepares to finish him. Turan rolls out of the way just in time as the monster crashes into the ground behind him. In that case, he mutters, ready to change tactics. Turan reaches into his belt pouch, pulling out a small, jagged stone. He begins to whip his sling in a rapid circle, the weapon whistling as it gathers momentum. The monster leopard, wreathed in black smoke and glowing yellow energy, charges straight at him. With precise timing, Turan releases the shot, sending the projectile flying from his hand. He follows through with the swing, his eyes tracking the stone as it streaks across the clearing. His eye pulses with a bright, golden light, a sign of the immense power he's channeled into the weapon. The stone breaks the sound barrier, creating a massive circular shockwave that ripples through the air. He shifts his weight, his sandal digging into the forest floor to stabilize his posture. His expression remains dead serious, his sharp gaze locked onto the beast. The projectile becomes a spiraling drill of light, tearing through the air with unstoppable force. The creature barely has time to react as the glowing shot closes the distance in an instant. The sheer pressure of the approaching projectile forces the monster's head back. The stone impacts the creature's skull with a violent explosion of light and dark blood. Dust and debris erupt from the impact site as the beast's head is snapped back by the force. Turan stands firm, dwarfed by the massive, snarling head of the beast as it collapses. A cold smirk touches Turan's face. He knew exactly where he wanted this to end. From an aerial view, the monster is reeling, its massive body unable to withstand the trauma. The final impact pulverizes the creature's head, sending a spray of blood into the air. Turan looks on as the beast finally goes still, the tension leaving his body. The giant leopard lies slumped on the ground, its dark energy fading. It's the first time he's actually used this technique on a monster. He stares at the massive, mangled carcass, wondering if he should just kick it into a valley and be done with it. Wiping a smear of monster blood from his face, Turan lets out a tired sigh. He can't believe those village bastards are putting him to this much work. The reason for his strength is simple. Turan is a wizard. 8 years ago, he first realized he wasn't like other kids. At just 10 years old, he was already levitating furniture around the house. He was so excited, calling for his mom to look at the logs flying. But when she saw him, she didn't look impressed. She looked terrified. He kept going, showing off that he could control fire and wind too. His mother snapped, screaming at him to stop it immediately. She grabbed a floating log right out of the air. She knelt down and told him they needed to have a very serious talk. She asked if he wanted them to live a long, peaceful life together. Then she made him promise to never use his powers again. It was a heavy vow. He could never let another soul see what he could do. Turan asked why, so she brought up the old legends. He listened as she broke down the world's harsh reality. Nobles are pure-blooded descendants of the gods, while knights are the mixed-blood offspring. He knew the stories, but he didn't know how they applied to him. She explained that even among wizards there is a strict and cruel hierarchy. Since his father was a knight, the high-born nobles would only see Turan as a slave. She hammered it home. Nobody could ever find out his secret. She asked if he could handle that burden, and he agreed. 8 years have passed, and Turan has never broken that promise. He stays hidden away, keeping to himself on Heir Hill. He doesn't care about glory or showing off his strength. As long as he stays on the mountain, his secret remains safe. But his quiet life is suddenly cut short by a loud banging. Someone is at the door, screaming for him to get outside. Turan opens it up to see what the commotion is about. A mob of angry villagers is waiting for him, looking for trouble. He just gives a long yawn, completely bored by their presence. They're accusing him of killing Ravis, which he finds ridiculous. The leader of the group loses his cool and grabs Turan by his shirt. He yells that Turan hurt the old man and drew him to the monsters. Turan doesn't even flinch, looking the man straight in the eye. He sees right through their little game. These men ran away and let Ravis die, and now they're looking for a scapegoat. He mocks them, calling it the easiest way to hide their own cowardice. The leader swings a massive punch, shouting Turan's name in a rage. Turan leans back, letting the fist whistle past his face. He slams his forehead into the guy's nose, drawing blood instantly. The rest of the mob tries to swarm him, but he just keeps walking. Under his breath, he gives a simple magical command. One of the attackers suddenly trips over his own feet and eats dirt. Turan walks away from the beaten mob like he's just finished his daily chores. One villager tries to grab his weapon and get back in the fight. Turan shuts him down instantly, leaving the guy groaning on the ground. He moves through the group with surgical precision, taking out anyone who hasn't run yet. A single, well-placed punch is all he needs to handle the local bullies. In no time, the entire mob is face down in the grass, defeated and broken. It's been 8 years of this, hiding the fact that he's actually a wizard. He tells them they should have saved some of that energy for Ravis's funeral. He turns to the village women watching the fight and asks if they want a round too, but they quickly back off. With the mob finally leaving, Turan turns his back on the town. He heads back inside his hut, finally ready to relax. He knows the village will use this as an excuse to rip him off next time he goes to trade, but he doesn't care. He tosses his coat onto a chair, figuring he'll just beat them up again until they offer a fair deal. He thinks he's safe for the night after giving those punks a proper lesson. Then, a massive banging at the door nearly rattles the cabin off its foundation. Thinking the villagers are back for more, Turan rips the door open, ready to finish the job. Instead of a mob, he finds a lone traveler standing there, looking pretty worn out. The man, Kiorn, looks surprised by the aggressive welcome and quickly apologizes for the bad timing. Turan's guard stays up, A traveler with a sword this far out is definitely a red flag. He explains that some uninvited guests just left, which is why he's a bit on edge. He tries to remember his mother's lessons on manners, though talking nicely to strangers feels awkward. His eyes drift to the sword on Kjorn's hip, wondering what a warrior wants in this sleepy town. He's about to send him away when a loud stomach growl ruins the tension. Turan lets out a tired sigh, realizing the guy is just starving. He invites the stranger in, deciding a meal is better than another fight. Kjorn digs into the food like he hasn't eaten in days, calling it an absolute feast. He's surprised to find out Turan hasn't met many people from the outside world. Turan explains that he's lived his whole life on this hill as a shepherd, where tourists are rare. Kjorn watches him closely, his professional instincts clearly at work. They share a drink as the tension in the room starts to fade. Kjorn notes that for a simple shepherd, Turan has surprisingly good manners. Turan mentions he learned everything from his mother, though she passed away years ago. Kjorn offers a respectful gesture, saying a mother who raised such a son must be with the gods. Turan keeps it humble, saying he just lives the way he was taught. He flips the script, asking what would bring a man like Kjorn all the way out here. Kjorn reveals he was hired for a specific favor, to hunt down a monster puma. Then he drops that they reveal he's a wizard. Turan realizes this is the specialist the village elder was talking about. Kjorn finishes his bite and asks if it's his turn to ask some questions. He mentions that despite the rumors, he hasn't seen any sign of a monster in the area. What's even weirder is how calm Turan is, knowing there's supposedly a beast on the loose. He leans in, asking if he isn't terrified of being the monster's next meal. Kjorn narrows his eyes, pointing out that for a shepherd who's never left his hometown, Turan is acting remarkably brave. The traveler leans forward, his voice dropping as he asks the one question that could change everything. Who are you? The question triggers a memory of a younger Turan sitting at the kitchen table, asking his mother why his magic has to be a secret. His mother looked at him with a weary expression, explaining that the world is a dangerous place filled with bad nobles. She compared the hierarchy of power to a flock, where the nobles are the shepherds and the knights are merely the dogs they keep. She warned him that while these powerful people might act like family, they wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice their dogs if it served their interests. Her voice was gentle but firm as she told him she didn't want that kind of life for him. She just wanted them to stay together. She made him promise to never let anyone know he was a wizard, especially other magic users who would turn him into a disposable tool. As Turan stares at the wizard sitting in his home, his mother's final, grim warning rings in his head, that keeping his secret might one day require him to kill. Turan just stares at him, dead serious, refusing to give anything away. Kjorn leans in closer, asking why he won't answer the question, but then the old man just bursts out laughing, saying that the boy's intense glare made his joke way too awkward. Turan is completely caught off guard. He actually thought the traveler was serious about outing him. He apologizes, admitting he doesn't have much of a sense of humor. Kjorn waves it off, apologizing for flustering him. Turan finally cracks a smile, realizing it's his first time hearing a wizard joke. Kjorn admits he probably took the teasing a bit too far. Kjorn holds out his hand for a proper introduction. He says he's just a wanderer named Kjorn. They shake on it, finally putting the tension to rest. Turan introduces himself as a simple shepherd. Over a warm meal, Kjorn mentions he's actually 75 years old. He's stunned by the reveal, but the wizard explains that his kind ages way slower than ordinary people. Turan asks how he ended up as a wanderer, and Kjorn tells him he left after serving a noble family for 60 years. He says he just wanted to spend his later years roaming around without settling down. His host thinks that sounds pretty romantic. The conversation flows easily, and for once, the boy feels comfortable. He realizes he's actually enjoying talking to a good person like this. They sit around the small table for hours, and the host loses track of time. Before they know it, the sun is already starting to peek through the window. Kjorn stands up, realizing it's time he got going. He puts a high-quality silver coin on the table to cover the cost of the meal. Turan accepts the payment, and the traveler tells him not to act like they'll never see each other again. He walks out, joking that he might come back to mooch off him a few more times. The morning light floods the valley as the guest heads off. Turan heads out to his own work, calling his flock together. The sheep look up, ready to follow their shepherd. It's back to the usual routine in the quiet fields. Turan can't help but smile, thinking about how long it's been since he had a conversation that felt this good. As he pets one of the sheep, he reflects on the easy humor his visitor naturally has. He really does seem like a genuinely good person. The shepherd had always assumed knights were just emotionless hunting dogs for arrogant nobles, but this man is different. Still, he wonders how he should have told him that the monsters on the hill are already gone. Meanwhile, Kjorn makes his way through the dense woods of Hisarl Hill. He stops in his tracks, feeling like something is strange about the area. He sees the debris from a major battle, but he can't sense a monster anywhere. He looks up at a massive scar on a tree, confirming a fight definitely happened here. The traveler finds the remains of the beast and wonders if another wizard beat him to the punch. He lets out a sigh of relief, thinking that as long as the village is safe, it doesn't matter who killed it. Suddenly, his eyes widen in shock. He whips around as a dark, overwhelming presence closes in. A massive, grotesque claw with a single giant eye slams into the ground. The creature is a nightmare of multiple faces, jagged teeth, and blood. Kyorn stares up at the towering beast in horror, realizing it's a monster's wraith, the vengeful mana of a creature that wasn't properly finished. Kyorn stares at the monster, remains in shock, unable to believe someone would just leave a corpse like this. Before he can process it, a massive, shadowy claw lunges from the trees. He barely manages to dodge as the ground where he just stood is pulverized into dust. The knight realizes the gravity of the situation. Leaving a monster's corpse without purifying its mana has created a wraith. The creature lunges again, forcing him to leap high into the air to avoid being crushed. As he hovers, Kyorn wonders why a wizard capable of killing the original monster would be so careless. He lands and prepares a counterattack, knowing that only a master could have taken down the beast in the first place. He starts channeling his energy, wondering if the previous hunter had some darker intention. Bright, crackling mana surges around his arm as he readies a spell. He fires a concentrated beam of magic straight at the creature's head. The spell connects with an explosion of light right in the beast's gaping maw, but his heart sinks as the smoke clears and the monster doesn't even flinch. Suddenly, the monster vanishes into a pool of shadow on the ground. Kyorn whips around, trying to track its movement as it counters his magic. He realizes too late that the shadow is spreading right beneath his feet. A massive tail whips out from the darkness, catching him off guard. The impact is brutal, sending blood spraying as he's tossed aside like a rag doll. He hits the ground hard, gasping for air as he realizes this thing is way beyond a mere knight's level. He's sent tumbling back, a deep wound opening in his side. Breathing heavily, Kyorn realizes his luck has finally run out in this remote village. The old man struggles to his feet, facing down the massive beast for one last stand. He decides to put everything into one final suicidal strike to take the monster with him. Every last drop of mana is concentrated into his hand as he waits for the moment the creature lunges. The wraith lunges forward, its massive claws ready to tear him apart. Kyorn grits his teeth, his hand glowing with a blinding, desperate light. He charges forward, ready to trade his life for a single killing blow. Suddenly, a flash of blue light erupts, obliterating the monster's attack. A massive wave of mana slams into the wraith, completely stopping it in its tracks. Kyorn freezes, staring in utter disbelief at the power unfolding before him. He looks up to see the shepherd standing there, looking like a completely different person. Turan casually asks if he's alright, joking that his own joke was pretty startling too. The boy walks forward with a calm, heavy presence that the old man only ever felt from high-ranking masters. It finally clicks. The shepherd isn't just some kid, he's a powerful wizard. Kyorn finds his voice and asks why he didn't say anything earlier. Then he changes his mind and asks why the boy even bothered to save him. Turan just gives a small, knowing smile. He thinks back to their conversation by the fireplace, when the guest had asked him why he worked so hard for so little. At the time, the knight had told him he could earn far more money using his skills elsewhere. Turan had called the villagers pitiful people, which confused the old man. The boy explained that commoners on the frontier live in constant fear without any real protection, but Kyorn's words stuck with him. The idea that wizards have a duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. The traveler had smiled, admitting that everyone has to find their own path in life. Turan smiles as he reflects on Kyorn's words, noting that everyone truly does have their own way of living. The peaceful memory is shattered as the monster wraith strikes, sending a violent shockwave through the trees. Kyorn urgently tells the boy to listen, warning him that this creature is far beyond what they can handle. He insists that Turan must go warn the village chief and start the evacuation immediately. The veteran knight squares his shoulders against the towering nightmare, determined to hold it back alone. Flames ignite in his palm as he readies his mana. Even though he knows his chances of survival are slim, he is suddenly stunned into silence as Turan calmly tells him that everything is going to be alright. A glowing pebble floats between them, vibrating with a level of mana control that seems impossible. Kyorn looks at the young man, his mind reeling as he realizes the boy has been hiding a terrifying amount of power. The old knight watches in awe as more debris begins to rise, caught in a surging tide of blue energy. The air hums with intense pressure as Turan unleashes a massive aura of mana, eclipsing even the wraith. The boy stands at the center of the storm, his true identity as a powerful wizard finally laid bare. With a confident smirk, Turan admits that he's also curious to find out exactly where his limits lie. The massive monster looms over Turan, its glowing green eye fixed right on him. Kyorn watches from the side as the creature's dark energy surges. Turan realizes his stones and kicks aren't doing a single thing to this monster. Kyorn yells out that physical attacks are completely useless against a wraith. The beast slams its massive limb down, forcing the young shepherd to scramble back. When Turan asks how to deal with it, Kyorn tells him he needs fire, or lightning, anything elemental to bypass its spiritual form. A small flame suddenly flickers to life right over the monster's head. Kyorn is stunned. He didn't expect the kid to actually try manifesting magic right then and there. He's even more confused when he realizes Turan doesn't even know the first thing about wizard common sense. It hits him. This kid has never even absorbed mana before in his entire life. Despite that, Turan charges forward with a massive burst of energy. Kyorn can't believe how strong he is without any real training. He shouts instructions, telling Turan to make the fire and then shoot it. Turan focuses, and a ball of roaring flame begins to swirl in his palm. Manifesting fire is one thing, but Kyorn knows controlling it usually takes years of practice. To his utter shock, the boy does it instantly, raising the concentrated heat high into the air. He unleashes the elemental blast directly into the creature. The wraith is engulfed in a bright orange inferno. It screeches as the flames start eating away at its spiritual body. Kyorn screams for him to keep his mind focused and keep pouring mana in so the fire doesn't die out. He tells him he has to burn every single part of that thing away. Turan stays locked in, his eyes fixed on his target. He doesn't let up, letting the fire roar until the beast is completely gone. Kyorn stands back, finally able to breathe as the threat vanishes. He notes that was an incredibly strong wraith, something usually only a noble could handle, and yet this kid just took it out. Turan stands amidst the giant, charred remains, wondering if it's finally over. Kyorn tells him he needs to absorb the mana left behind if he doesn't want another one showing up. Turan has no clue how, so Kyorn explains he just needs to visualize the energy draining into his own body. The young man closes his eyes and concentrates. Trails of green energy start leaking out from the monster's bones. It all rushes toward him, swirling into a concentrated sphere of mana. The energy courses through his entire being, lighting up his silhouette. His eyes snap open, feeling the surge of power settle inside him. Kyorn tells him he'll probably feel a rush from it, still reeling from what he just witnessed. He double-checks if this really was Turan's first time doing any of this. He explains that absorbing the mana of fallen foes is the best way for a wizard to grow, but seeing Turan handle that level of power on day one tells Kyorn this kid's potential is in a different league. The knight looks at him with newfound respect, realizing the young man is someone truly special. He repeats the boy's name, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Kyorn gives a deep bow, apologizing for his earlier rudeness and asking Turan which noble house he belongs to. Inside his small home, Turan looks at Kyorn, still surprised by the man's sudden change in attitude. Kyorn sits there, his arm in a sling, looking a bit worse for wear but humble. The knight apologizes for his earlier behavior, saying it was wrong to treat someone of Turan's caliber that way. Turan just shakes his head, insisting that he's nothing more than a simple shepherd. He gives the knight a sharp look, telling him to knock off the formal stuff. Kyorn is genuinely curious, though. He doesn't understand why a wizard this powerful is living in a hut on a hill. Turan explains that he's just following his mother's final wish. She warned him that nobles would only use him as a tool and then discard him if they knew what he was capable of. Kyorn looks down, admitting that his mother was actually being very wise. The knight explains that power of any kind always attracts conflict, no matter where you go. He begins to tell a story about a massive war between great houses that happened over 20 years ago. It was a brutal conflict between House Arabian and the powerful House Zahar. Kyorn reveals the grim statistics. Out of 3,000 Arabian knights, a third of them were slaughtered. Turan listens in silence as the weight of the story starts to set in. The knight lost everyone close to him, his teacher, his friends, and even his own wife and son. He tells Turan that a knight's life can often be shorter and more meaningless than a commoner's. Turan listens carefully, wondering where his own potential fits into this dangerous world. Kyorn admits it's embarrassing to say this while injured, but he's actually a very skilled knight himself, and yet the shepherd standing before him easily destroyed a monster that the knight couldn't even touch. He tells Turan that his power isn't just that of a knight. At the very least, he's noble level. Turan looks down, questioning if his mother lied when she told him his father was just a regular knight. Kyorn stands up, telling the young man that it would be a waste for him to stay hidden on this hill forever. He explains that humanity needs more powerful people to protect them from what's out there. Ancient races pushed out by gods long ago are still lurking, waiting for their chance to take back the world. The nobles ignore this threat and just keep fighting amongst themselves for scraps of power. They step outside, and Kyorn asks if Turan is really satisfied just herding sheep. Turan looks away, wondering what he could possibly find if he actually left the mountain. Kyorn says that all depends on what he wants: wealth, authority, or maybe just a purpose. The knight walks toward the horizon, telling him to just try imagining what his life could be. He suggests Turan could wander the lands like him, or maybe find a great house to call his own. Turan looks at him, finally admitting that the knight might be right. Wandering the world sounds a lot more interesting than watching sheep all day. For the first time, he's actually curious about what else is out there. Kyorn smiles, promising to support Turan no matter what path he chooses to take. But then he stops, realizing he forgot to ask one very important question. He apologizes, realizing Turan still doesn't know much about the world of magic. He explains that nobles inherit unique traits from their ancestors, called bloodline abilities. He asks if any specific magic felt unusually easy, or if Turan has any other strange talents. Turan clenches his fist, noting that he's always felt physically stronger than most people. He mentions he has an incredible sense of smell, and he's actually pretty good at throwing things. Kyorn starts to chuckle, saying that being good with thrown weapons is a common trait of his own house. But then a look of realization hits the knight's face as he processes Turan's words. Turan looks at Kyorn, confused by the knight's sudden shift into a somber, serious mood. Kiorn speaks with a heavy tone, telling the boy that he's finally realized which noble house his abilities are tied to. Turan asks for the name of this mysterious house, wanting to know the truth about his heritage. The knight mentions House Zahar, a name synonymous with a devastating war and known to all as the ruthless pursuers or hunters. Turan stands in shocked silence, processing the weight of a lineage he never knew he carried. Turan stares, wide-eyed. He can't believe he's part of the Zahar family, the same bloodline that caused so much pain. Kiorn stands in the distance like a ghost of the war. Turan realizes he's related to the very monsters this man fought. He's torn. Part of him wants to apologize for what his relatives did, even though he's never even met them. Kiorn speaks up, breaking the heavy silence. He steps closer and places a hand on Turan's shoulder, telling the kid to drop the worried look. Turan still feels the weight of it. He wasn't there, but the legacy of his family is hard to ignore. Kiorn says that trying to wash blood with blood only makes the cycle go on forever. The boy asks the obvious question, doesn't the man have any regrets about his past? They stand alone in the massive, quiet field. Kiorn suggests it's finally time for Turan to head down the mountain. He warns that if Turan chases power in the world below, he'll eventually cross paths with the Zahars, but Kiorn doesn't care about the name. He says he trusts the person Turan is. He remembers how Turan saved him, exposing a lifelong secret just to keep a stranger alive. That goodness matters more than blood. He thinks someone with Turan's talent and heart might be the key to stopping the next war before it starts. Kiorn tells him not to sweat the family stuff yet. Nothing is set in stone. Turan takes a moment to process it and decides he's ready to leave the hill. Kiorn gives him a small smile, glad he made the right choice. But the boy isn't leaving just yet. He's staying until the knight's injuries are fully healed. Shift to the interior of the house. The sun peeks through the window as they prepare for a different kind of training. Inside, Kiorn starts the lesson. To use magic, you first have to understand mana. Turan listens intently. Kiorn calls mana the key to omnipotence, though it's not quite that simple. He begins to break down the standard for mana that actually matches a spell. He holds up 3 fingers. Magic difficulty comes down to 3 things: bloodline, affinity, and causality. Bloodline is what you're born with. It's the raw potential in your DNA. He gestures to his bandaged arm. Since Turan doesn't have a healer's bloodline, fixing this with magic would be nearly impossible. Some families, like the Revista from the south, can pull off incredible feats without a single day of practice. Then there's affinity, or just how familiar you are with what you're trying to do. Turan realizes that's why his fireball worked. He just imagined he was throwing a rock, something he's done his whole life. Kiorn nods. If he had just tried to conjure random flames, it wouldn't have been nearly as fast or powerful. Finally, there's causality, the most important part. Even a veteran like Kiorn admits he doesn't fully grasp it. He challenges Turan. What would happen if he tried to use pure mana to kill someone directly? Turan holds his hand over a mug. Instead of a spell, it just releases a bunch of weak, erratic sparks. That's the result of zero causality. It's just too complex to achieve without a logical bridge. A light bulb goes off. Turan starts to see the logic behind the power. He creates a flame over the mug again. It's way easier to provide a cause of death, like a fireball, than to just wish for it. Kiorn is genuinely impressed. He jokes that Turan could have been a scholar if he hadn't become a mage. They move on to magical beasts. Turan can control normal animals, but beasts are different because they have their own mana. A great mage doesn't just throw power around. They have to understand the principles in the situation. Turan gets curious about his own heritage. He asks if the Zahar bloodline has a specialty. Kiorn tells him they were masters of stealth and tracking. He tells the boy to give it a try right now. Turan closes his eyes and focuses. He focuses on the idea of not being seen, heard, or even smelled. A strange distortion ripples over his face as he pours his will into the spell. Kiorn watches, looking a little creeped out. He asks if it's working, sensing the kid is actually pulling it off. Turan is gone. He vanished into thin air, leaving Kiorn standing alone in the room. Kiorn looks around, genuinely impressed. He admits he can't see the kid at all. Turan starts to fade back into view, a slight distortion in the air revealing where he was standing. Kiorn mentions that this was the most feared ability during the war. The Arabian Knights were terrified of it. He calls it unfairly powerful, but he warns Turan that it's still not invincible. The knight offers to teach some proper training methods, though Turan wonders if he's teaching an enemy a bit too much. Kiorn doesn't care about the family name. He just remembers the boy who saved his life and treated his wounds. He puts it simply, he trusts Turan's character more than a bloodline. Later at the village, the chief is having a meltdown. He can't believe the lazy shepherd is actually selling his sheep and leaving. Turan stands his ground with his gear packed. The chief is fuming that he wasn't consulted first. Turan doesn't blink. He tells the old man that what he does with his property is his business and they'll have to find a new shepherd. He gives them an ultimatum: buy the sheep at a fair price or he'll just set them loose and walk away. He points out that if he lets them go, the villagers are going to have a nightmare of a time catching them all. The chief realizes he's stuck. There's no point in trying to bully someone who clearly isn't scared of him anymore. He grumbles and hands over a bag of coins. Turan takes his payment and officially closes that chapter of his life. Turan and Kiorn hit the road together for a while. Kiorn tells him he's free to do whatever he wants now. The boy wonders if he should have collected a reward for catching that magical beast earlier. Kyorn just smiles. After all, it was Turan who did all the heavy lifting in that fight. They eventually reach a fork in the road. It's time to part ways. Turan apologizes for turning down the offer to travel together, but he says he's more comfortable on his own for now. Kyorn isn't offended at all. He just thanks the kid for everything he's done. The old knight tells him to take care out there. Turan gives him a genuine smile, hoping they can meet again someday under better circumstances. He stands there for a long time, just watching Kyorn's figure disappear into the distance. It's only later that the boy realizes why he didn't want Kyorn to speak to him so formally. He thinks back to his childhood with his mother. Even though she gave him plenty of love, something was missing. He'd always been searching for a father figure, someone who could show him what kind of man he was supposed to be. Now, he's truly alone, walking through a harsh and dusty wasteland. The landscape is empty and desolate as he keeps moving forward. He pulls his hood up against the wind, his expression focused. Up ahead, he spots a group with a cart. He wonders if they're just merchants traveling between villages. He decides to approach them to see if he can get some directions. The lead traveler, a man with an eye patch, looks suspicious. Turan asks where the nearest city is. The man points him toward a city called Mure, but there's something off about the way he's looking at the kid. Turan thanks them and starts to move along, ready to be on his way. Suddenly, the man steps out and blocks his path. He's not letting the boy leave that easily. He asks if the boy really thought he could just take the information and walk away for free. Turan looks back at him. He's starting to realize these guys aren't merchants at all. The men draw their swords, surrounding the lone traveler in the middle of the road. The leader drops the act. He laughs and asks Turan what he's going to do now that he's cornered by bandits. He calls the kid reckless for being out here alone. In a place like this, people disappear all the time. He demands Turan's bag and cloak, threatening to make things bloody if he doesn't cooperate. Turan looks down, his voice cold as he realizes these men aren't just thieves, but murderers. He isn't afraid, he's simply evaluating the situation. He looks up with a dark, confident smirk. Even with a sword tip inches from his face, he decides these bandits will be the perfect target practice for his new skills. A bunch of bandits in cloaks surround Turan, laughing their heads off because he's acting like some kind of wizard. He doesn't just act, he unleashes a massive gust of wind that sends them all flying back. Turan figures that shaving the wind instead of just creating it from nothing is a much better way to save mana. The bandits are left groveling in the sand, completely blindsided by the sudden display of power. Turan casually pulls water from his flask, making it hover and swirl between his fingers. He focuses his energy, and the water instantly hardens into a sharp, jagged shard of ice. Now he's got several of those ice shards floating around him, ready to fly. One of the bandits can barely believe what he's seeing, his face twisted in pure terror. Turan lets them loose. The shards pierce through the cloaked men in a blur of motion. He watches them fall, thinking about how just throwing stones might actually be faster than all this fancy magic. The leader with the eye patch drops his sword and begs for his life, realizing they picked the wrong target. The whole group is suddenly falling over themselves to apologize, promising anything if he'll just let them live. Turan takes a step forward, his boots crunching in the desert dirt. A sudden shockwave of magic hits the ground, kicking up a wall of sand and dust. The eye patch guy looks up, his face pale as he realizes there's no way out of this. Turan stands over the aftermath, blood soaking into the sand as he looks down with a cold expression. He towers over the one survivor left, who's shaking like a leaf and willing to answer anything. Turan's just curious. Why would they attack a lone traveler without even checking if he could fight back? He looks at the guy, genuinely wondering what made them so confident. The bandit stammers that because Turan was polite and bowed his head earlier, they just assumed he was a nobody. Turan realizes that his basic manners were actually what led these guys to their deaths. A drop of water hangs in the air as the bandit looks on in absolute dread. This reminds Turan of something Kyorn told him back when they were together. Kyorn warned him that out in the world he'd meet plenty of scum who wouldn't hesitate to hurt others for a quick buck. He sees the bandit's sword lying abandoned in the sand, a reminder of the threat they posed. Turan looks down at the body. He knows that sparing a life out of pity often just leads to 10 good people getting hurt later. He decides he's stalled long enough and looks up at the bright sky, ready to move on. He notices the wheel tracks the bandits left behind, cutting deep paths into the desert sand. He shoulders his pack and starts walking again, leaving the scene of the carnage far behind him. Even so, the reality of what he just did weighs on him. He actually killed people today. He feels a bit of guilt, but the memory of those bandits makes it clear he couldn't just let them go. He knows they would have just targeted someone else the moment his back was turned. As he keeps walking, his heart starts to settle, his mind focusing back on his journey. Eventually, the desert opens up, and he finds himself standing on a grassy hill under a clear blue sky. He looks out over the horizon and can't help but let out a small wow at the sight ahead. Sprawled out in the valley below is the city of Mure, a massive cluster of stone buildings and towers. Turan enters the city and is immediately hit by the sheer amount of people crowding the streets. The architecture is unlike anything he ever saw back in his small village, with tall stone walls and intricate windows. Walking through the bustling market, he finally feels like his journey has truly brought him to a new world. He stops by a fruit stall where a merchant is busy showing off some fresh-looking produce. The vendor asks what he can get for him, but Turan waves him off, explaining he's not there to shop. He remembers Kiorn's final bit of advice. The first thing a traveler should do in a new city is find a place to sleep. The fruit merchant isn't exactly a people person. He snaps at Turan to get lost if he's not planning on buying anything. Turan's taken aback. He wonders if being rude to customers is just some unspoken rule in big cities. He points to the apples and asks for the price, trying to stay polite despite the guy's attitude. The merchant tells him it's 2 dupit. He can tell Turan is from out of town and offers to take different coins if that's all he has. Turan drops the money into the man's hand and asks for directions to the nearest inn. The guy points him toward a building with a blue roof, claiming it's the biggest place in the city. A cheerful blonde named Lena greets him as soon as he steps inside the pub and inn. Turan asks what a room costs for the night. Lena's just happy to see a handsome guest for once. She quotes him 16 dupit, and Turan doesn't hesitate to take the room. He slides over a small pouch of coins, but he's not just there for a bed. He asks Lena if she knows about any local monster bounties nearby. His goal is simple: hunt monsters and absorb their mana, exactly like Kiorn taught him. Lena just stares at him for a second, wondering why he's so eager to talk about monsters. Turan knows better than to expect information for free, so he waits for her price. She tells him that if he wants a bounty, he needs to check the city hall. Lena can't help but giggle. She says he really must be from the absolute middle of nowhere if he doesn't know about city halls. She explains that's where the city's officials handle all the public business for the Lord. Since the sun is already down, she tells him it's probably closed and he should head over tomorrow. Lena leans in, curious if he's trying to become a monster hunter. She mentions a common superstition that ordinary people can become powerful wizards just by killing monsters. She scoffs at the idea, saying only an idiot would actually believe in stuff like that. Suddenly, a beefy guy named Maidan puts a hand on Turan's shoulder and says it's a solid fact. Lena nearly jumps out of her skin, shocked to see that Maidan is actually still alive. Maidan just laughs it off, telling her he's not dying until he achieves his dream of becoming a wizard. Turan's ears perk up. He asks if Maidan can tell him more about how killing monsters leads to magic. Lena looks totally unimpressed as Maidan explains how hunters supposedly get stronger with every kill. Maidan gestures to the rest of his crew, saying they're all out here hunting for that same reason. Turan looks them over and asks if any of them have actually managed to become a wizard yet. Maidan admits they haven't. In this city, the only real wizards are the Lord and the 3 mages serving under him. He notices the sling hanging from Turan's belt and comments on how worn out it looks. Maidan figures that with a tool like that, Turan must be pretty good at taking down small fry like fox or rabbit monsters. He asks if Turan would be interested in joining their crew for a hunt. Turan just gives a small, polite smile and turns him down. Later that night, Turan is sprawled out on his bed, finally getting some rest. He let out a long sigh, thinking about what a chaotic day it's been. He looks over at his gear, still a bit dazed by the fact that he actually made it out of his village. He holds his hand up, watching the faint blue mana crackle between his fingers. He wonders what's going to happen next, his thoughts racing as he tries to fall asleep. Suddenly, he sits bolt upright, his senses on high alert. It reminds him of a conversation he had with Kiorn while they were traveling. Kiorn had warned him that just because he reached a city didn't mean he was safe. He told Turan to never let his guard down, and Turan promised him he understood. Recalling Kiorn's warning to never let his guard down, Turan prepares for an intruder. His hand crackles with blue mana, ready for a fight. He inches the door open, peeking into the hallway with a cold, focused gaze. His silver eyes narrow as he watches the figure on the other side, his body tensed and ready to strike. To his utter surprise, he finds Lena standing there. She looks at him tearfully and asks if he was already asleep. Turan is left speechless as she tells him she was worried he might be cold and decided to come by to keep him warm. Lena gives him a bashful, suggestive look while adjusting her clothes. Turan is completely flustered, asking her what she could possibly mean by that. Lena walks into Turan's room like she owns the place. Lena gets right in his space, offering her services for a bit of cash. She leans in close, claiming she can read exactly what he's thinking. Suddenly, Kiorn's voice booms in a flashback, screaming at him not to do it. Kiorn gives him a whole lecture about being careful around inmates. He explains that while they have strong resistance, they could still pass something nasty onto someone else. Back in the room, Lena stomps out, looking annoyed that she didn't get a customer. Turan flops onto the bed, thinking about how cold-hearted the city really is. But then he remembers a conversation he had with the boss. He asks why Turan was trying to bring that one guy along. Maidan was pretty blunt about it, saying the guy would have been perfect as monster bait, but his tone softens. He tells Turan that the kid reminds him of how he used to be. Maidan admits he just wanted the kid clothes so he'd have a better chance of surviving. Staring at the ceiling, Turan realizes maybe the city isn't all that cold after all. The next morning, he heads out to the city hall to find some work. He walks up to the counter and the clerk asks how he can help. Turan asks if he looks like an official, but the clerk isn't impressed. He tells the man straight up that he's there to hunt some monsters. Another flashback to Kiorn, who's out in the fields petting a sheep. He warns Turan that the world won't be kind to him unless he makes it. He tells him that if he wants respect, he just needs to show everyone he's a wizard. The clerk slides a paper across the desk. Turan picks it up to get a good look at the target. It's a drawing of a blade crow. The clerk mocks him, asking if he thinks it looks like a cat. He explains that if you kill a monster, the corpse has to be brought into the city. If the mana isn't dispersed, it turns into a wraith, and the penalty for that is execution. Turan knows the stakes. shakes. He remembers the horror of a monster turning into a wraith. He asks why the knights don't just handle the monster hunting themselves. The clerk scoffs, saying the knights are busy keeping order inside the city walls. He looks Turan up and down, calling him a thug and saying it's a job for people like him. He assumes Turan is just another corpse to be, heading out to die. But then, Turan slams the actual corpse of a blade crow right onto the desk. The clerk's jaw drops. He can't believe what he's seeing. Everyone in the office gathers around, shocked that he brought it back so fast. The clerk is still stunned, asking if he really took it down all by himself. Turan isn't interested in the chatter. He just wants to know how to get his bounty. The clerk quickly hands over a heavy bag of coins, telling him to go get some rest. The guys checking out the bird are amazed that the blade wings are still in perfect condition. But Turan doesn't leave. The clerk looks up, surprised he's still standing there. Turan asks if there are any other monsters in the area worth hunting. The clerk just stares at him, completely baffled by the kid's confidence. With his pockets full, Turan sits down for a massive, expensive feast. The waitress is completely shocked that a skinny kid like Turan could take down 30 monsters in just 3 days. She notes he must have made a fortune from all those bounties. Turan tells her that money isn't actually his main goal. His real focus is the mana he absorbs from the monsters he kills. He remembers Kjorn and realizes his mana pool has grown several times over since they met, but he's starting to feel a limit hunting. Weak monsters only gets you so far. The waitress is still staring at him, totally bewildered. She's amazed he managed to put away that entire spread of food all by himself. The cook pops out, happy that Turan actually enjoyed the meal he made. Turan finishes up and starts to leave, thanking them for the delicious food. Suddenly, a hand grabs his collar and yanks him back. Some guy from another table demands to know why he's eating so well while they're struggling. He calls Turan a skinny runt and gets right in his face. The guy demands some charity from Turan's earnings. Turan doesn't hesitate. He catches a fist and immediately counters. He asks if they really want charity that badly as he readies his hands. The thug tries to land a punch, but Turan is way too fast for him. A single blow to the gut sends the guy reeling back. Another thug grabs a stool and tries to jump in, but Turan just kicks him away. He catches the stool mid-air and slams it down. Turan leans in, and the guy's eyes go wide with pure terror. With a flick of his hand, he sends the last of them flying across the floor. The waitress screams at them to stop brawling in her inn. The thugs immediately back down and start apologizing. Turan gives them a stern look and tells them it better not happen again. Maiden steps in, mentioning that things have been tight for them lately. One of the guys bows his head, muttering a quick apology. Turan asks Maiden if things are really that bad for his crew. Maiden admits they might not even be able to pay their room fee in a few days. Turan hands over a small pouch of coins, surprising everyone. He tells Maiden it's repayment for the kindness he showed when he tried to look out for him earlier. Maiden is stunned, wondering how the kid even knew about that. He immediately offers to trade all the information he has in exchange for the help. Later, Turan looks out over the rooftops of the city. He decides that this hunt will be his last one in this town. Maiden gave him the lowdown on the next city, so it's about time he hit the road. He thinks back on his time at the inn and realizes Maiden was a lot more useful than expected. He's not as seasoned as Kjorn, but his heart is in the right place. Turan's expression sharpens as he notices something out in the woods. A strange smell hits him, and it's definitely not something he wants to find. He races through the forest, praying that his gut feeling is wrong this time. He stops in front of a tree and finds massive claw marks carved deep into the trunk. Turan stands alone in the silent forest, his heart sinking as the smell of blood grows stronger. He rounds a thick tree and stops dead in his tracks at the gruesome sight of a man slumped against the bark, drenched in crimson. Staring down at the mangled face, he realizes with a jolt that the victim was one of the men traveling with Maiden. He finds Maiden himself nearby, barely clinging to life, and frantically asks what kind of nightmare could have done this to his crew. Turan stops in his tracks, sensing something is off in the quiet woods. He finds a man slumped against a tree, gasping for breath and covered in fresh blood. Nearby, the sound of wet grinding rings out as something feeds in the shadows. Bodies are scattered across the forest floor, and the trail of blood leads to a grisly sight. A giant, red-eyed rabbit monster sits among the carnage, blood dripping from its jagged teeth. Turan stays low, calmly assessing the beast before it notices him. Without warning, the creature lunges with terrifying, unnatural speed. Turan barely manages to twist out of the way as it blurs past. It's faster than any normal animal, nearly catching him off guard on the first pass. He pivots instantly, readying a strike to stop its momentum. He throws out a hand, channeling a quick burst of mana to intercept it. A sharp blast of energy connects, but the beast is already regrouping. The monster is relentless, weaving through the trees like a white shadow. Turan realizes this thing is conditioned to fight back against magic. A massive shadow looms over him as the creature leaps high into the air. Its glowing red eye locks onto him, fixed on its next meal. It kicks up a cloud of dust, briefly vanishing from sight in the thick brush. Then it comes charging straight down the path like a battering ram. Turan waits for the exact moment it commits to the leap, drawing his blade. He drives the dagger deep into the beast's throat as it lunges past. He uses its own forward force to widen the wound, sending it tumbling. The air ripples from the sheer impact of the collision. The rabbit beast screeches in pain, its head whipped back by the lethal hit. It tries to right itself, but its movements are already slowing. It staggers back into the dirt, leaving a thick trail of dark blood behind. It lets out a final gasp before its massive body finally goes limp. The monstrous thing lies dead, its red eyes losing their life and glow. Turan stands over the carcass, watching as it starts to dissolve into thick black smoke. It wasn't a natural monster, it was a shadow summon. He reaches out his hand, ready to claim the residual power left behind. A torrent of brilliant green mana begins to swirl around him, flowing into his palms. He's stunned by the amount. This single summon had more energy than anything he's ever hunted. It's almost hard to wrap his head around how much power he just absorbed. From the tree, the survivor watches in disbelief, realizing he was just saved by a wizard. Turan turns back to the man, his face remaining as stoic as ever. The survivor can only weep, mourning the friends who didn't make it. The sight takes Turan back to a memory of the man who first told him about Orum. Medon had described a city with a massive library holding thousands of ancient books. Back then, they had sat across from each other in a dimly lit tavern. Mida noticed that the only time Turan looked interested was when books were mentioned. He warned Turan that not just anyone could walk into a place like that. Only wizards were granted entry, a status Turan was determined to earn. Standing before 3 simple graves, Turan makes a final promise to his fallen companions. He decides to finally head to the city Medon told him about, Orum. He hopes they can rest in peace while he continues his journey alone. After a long trek, the massive gates of Orum finally come into view. The sheer scale of the city makes the towns he's visited before look like tiny villages. Orum is a sprawling fortress, built with a level of grandeur he didn't expect. He joins the long line of merchants and travelers waiting to enter the city. Guards in gray cloaks meticulously screen every single person at the gate. It's an efficient, disciplined system befitting a city of this importance. Halt! One of the guards barks, stopping Turan dead in his tracks. The man looks him over with pure disdain, refusing to let someone so filthy pass through. He tells Turan to go clean himself up before he even thinks about trying to get in. Turan ignores the insult, his eyes locked on the massive tower rising above the city walls. That's the library, the place where all the knowledge he seeks is hidden away. The structure is overwhelming, a monument to ancient magic that dwarfs everything around it. He reaches the library's main doors, but the guards there are just as stubborn. They inform him that only wizards are permitted to cross the threshold. When Turan claims he is one, the knight laughs, calling him a lunatic for even trying the lie. The guard warns him that impersonating a wizard is a crime punishable by death. Turan doesn't say another word. He just raises his hand and lets his mana flare. A heavy pressure fills the air, red mana crackling as it radiates from his palm. Kiorn, a seasoned warrior nearby, explains that real wizards can always sense one another's power. Turan releases a shockwave of energy, his eyes glowing as he shows the true depth of his strength. The sheer force of his aura sends the guard stumbling back, trembling in fear. "Are you all right?" one guard shouts as his comrade hits the floor, overwhelmed by the pressure. They realize this kid isn't an ordinary mage. His mana pool is at least noble class or higher. A knight of House Valtis is called over to assess the situation. Turan asks if he really needs permission just to walk through some doors. The knight explains that only the Master of Valtis can grant access to the restricted archives. Turan is escorted to a massive estate, where he lets out a long, weary sigh. He thought this would be a simple process, but it's becoming a major complication. He finds himself soaking in a luxurious bath, wondering how things escalated this fast. He's startled to find a group of maids waiting nearby to attend to his every need. He tells them it's fine if he washes himself, but they look like they're about to cry. The estate is massive, filled with gardens and intricate architecture. One of the maids begs him to let them serve him, fearing they'll be punished for failing a guest. She gasps, covering her mouth as she sees him properly for the first time. Turan ties his hair back, completely oblivious to the effect he's having. The maids are completely flustered, apologizing for being distracted by his appearance. He tells them there's nothing to forgive, but a cold voice from the doorway cuts him off. The young miss of the house approaches, her heady guard looming right behind her. She looks him up and down, mocking the guest who showed up looking like a beggar. Azella looks at the newly groomed Turan with a playful grin, noting that a bit of soap and fine clothes have transformed him into a prince. They exchange names. The mysterious boy is Turan, and the high-spirited girl reveals herself to be Azella, daughter of the House of Valtis. When she asks which noble house he hails from, Turan remains vague, stating that his background is difficult to discuss for personal reasons. Azella's expression shifts to one of curious suspicion, finding his evasiveness both intriguing and a bit frustrating. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she decides she hasn't seen enough of his true nature and resolves to play a little pranks on him. Without warning, a pillar of intense, fiery mana erupts from Azella, filling the grand hall with a sudden, scorching heat. Her eyes glow with the light of her flames as she leans in, eager to see how this mysterious guest will handle her sudden test of power. Turan is engulfed by the radiant aura, his calm facade finally breaking as he realizes the sheer intensity of the young noblewoman's magic. Turan's eye glows with a brilliant blue mana as he sharpens his focus. He stands at the center of a massive magical duel, facing off against an overwhelming surge of golden energy. The shockwave is so intense that a guard has to step in and shield the maids from the fallout. As the magic settles, ripples of energy still dance across the ornate ceiling of the grand hall. Turan lets out a heavy sigh, finally letting his guard down after the intense exchange. Across the room, Mesa Arabian just laughs, her hands still sparking with leftover magic. Turan watches her closely, his expression unreadable after their clash. She leans forward with a mischievous grin and asks him right then and there if he wants to marry her. The sudden question catches Turan completely off guard, leaving him sweating and speechless. Seeing his reaction, Mesa bursts out laughing and tells him it was just a joke to see his face. But she doesn't stop there, teasingly mentioning that the seat beside her is wide open if he ever changes his mind. She turns to leave with her attendant, leaving a stunned Turan alone with the library staff. Turan stays silent, his mind racing as he processes the encounter. He looks down at his hand, which is still trembling from the raw power of her magic. He realizes her mana is easily on par with his own, making him wonder if this level of strength is actually normal in the outside world. Thinking back to how he got here, Turan recalls his first official meeting in Orum. He was there to see the city's ruler, Lord Valtus. Turan formally introduces himself and asks for permission to access the local library. Lord Valtus warns him that people usually come looking for ancient spells or mana-boosting secrets, but they won't find them here. Turan assures him that's not what he's after, he just wants to learn. Satisfied, the Lord tells him it's late and to rest up before coming back the next morning. The next day, Turan arrives at the Sky Library, a massive tower covered in ancient vines. The guards confirm his pass and bow, welcoming him inside as an esteemed guest. Stepping through the doors, Turan is immediately struck by the sheer scale of the interior. A giant spiral staircase winds upward toward a skylight at the very top of the tower. He walks deeper into the library, feeling dwarfed by the endless rows of books. Suddenly, a voice greets him from the shadows of the shelves. A small girl in a long white robe identifies herself as the librarian. She immediately starts laying down the rules, warning him that he'll have to pay for any damage. Turan is caught off guard by the fact that the library spirit is basically just a kid. She gets right in his face, warning him that she'll be watching him the entire time he's there. Turan asks if she's actually read all the books here herself. She claims she has, and asks what he's looking for. History? Romance? She even teases him with a more mature suggestion, given his young age. Turan shuts that down immediately, saying he just wants to learn the basic common sense of the world. With a bit of magic, books start flying off the shelves and stacking themselves on the table. She tells him that most of the books are ancient, but this specific section might actually help. Turan picks up the first volume, his interest finally piqued. It's his first time actually holding a real book like this. As he starts reading, he's quickly amazed by the depth of information he's been missing. From that day on, he makes it a routine to spend every day studying in the back of the library. He spends his time learning about the world's geography, the various races, and the etiquette expected of a wizard. He spent his time learning about the relics and monsters of the old empire, pieces of a world long forgotten. With every book he finished, the unknown corners of this world started to feel a lot more vivid to Turan. Lord Valtus eventually calls him in, acknowledging that he's been making great use of the library, but the Lord makes it clear that giving him access was an act of goodwill, and now he's looking for some return on that investment. He gets straight to the point, asking Turan for a favor in exchange for the hospitality. Apparently, a monster has been terrorizing travelers north of Orum, and the 4 knights sent to handle it were eaten alive. Lord Valtus admits they're short on manpower, and needs a noble with some real power to step in and resolve the threat. Turan doesn't hesitate, noting that protecting people is part of a wizard's duty anyway, though he knows most wizards usually prefer to stay idle and out of the line of fire. The northern trade route is vital to Orum, and having it blocked for 10 days is already hurting the city's economy. Turan realizes the library access wasn't exactly free, it was just bait for this job. Soon after, a detachment leaves the city gates, with Turan and Mesa Arabian leading the way. Mesa is already annoyed, complaining that her father is making way too big of a deal out of this. She looks back at the group, wondering if the knights are really so unreliable they needed a guest's help. Marvin Valtis just gives her a polite smile, teasingly asking if she's being a little hard on their father. Mesa tells him to just drop it and focus on the road. Marvin formally introduces himself to Turan, saying he's looking forward to seeing what he can do. Turan keeps things brief, wanting to finish the job quickly so he can get back to his studies. Marvin leans in with a smirk, asking Turan if he happens to be interested in his older sister. Turan gives him a deadpan no, which Marvin seems relieved to hear. The casual talk comes to a sudden halt as they reach the site of the attack. They find the remains of a caravan, smashed to pieces in the middle of the woods. One of the knights checks the wreckage, trying to figure out what kind of creature could do this much damage. He finds a massive, 5-fingered handprint crushed deep into the wood of a broken carriage. Looking at the shape of the mark, the knight concludes they're dealing with some kind of giant monkey. Mesa looks skeptical, having a hard time believing a simple beast could cause this much destruction. Turan observes that the beast likely dragged the victims into the forest after the initial attack. Marvin admits he isn't much of a tracker and asks if anyone can actually find the trail. Turan steps forward, saying he'll give it a shot using his own magic. Mesa is surprised surprised, asking if he's from a specialized bloodline that's used to this kind of tracking. Turan doesn't bother explaining, just prepares a spell to locate their target. He casts a search spell, sending a pulse of blue mana through the surrounding trees. He catches the scent immediately and points the group deeper into the forest. They follow the trail until it leads them to the edge of a small river. Mesa notes that the beast seems to have washed itself off here, likely to throw off its scent, but Turan isn't convinced a mere beast would have the intelligence to do that intentionally. His eyes suddenly narrow as he catches a presence lurking nearby. He shouts a warning to the others just as the shadows above them start to move. A massive, hulking monster with glowing red eyes drops down from the trees right into their midst. The creature is enormous, letting out a deafening roar as it launches its attack. One of the veteran knights screams for everyone to dodge as the beast lunges forward. The monster is a blur of pure violence, tearing through the knights in seconds and sending blood flying everywhere. Turan shifts his weight, moving with a grace that belies the desperate struggle happening just a few feet away. He remains composed despite the chaos, his gaze fixed on the beast as he calculates its next move. Amidst the blood and screams, ghostly silhouettes with piercing white eyes watch from the darkness, witnessing the massacre with cold indifference. Mesa stands amidst the wreckage, her expression hard as she looks down at the remains of the beast's latest victim. Watching the brutal efficiency, Turan can't help but think that his mother's warnings about the world were entirely accurate. Mesa refuses to let the slaughter go unpunished, shouting at the top of her lungs for the group to press the attack. Realizing it's being cornered, the massive beast turns and bolts, disappearing into the thicket with surprising speed. The knights shout in alarm, realizing their quarry is escaping back into the depths of the forest where they'll lose it for sure. Turan calmly prepares a countermeasure, imbuing a simple stone with a heavy concentration of mana. Mesa and Marvin charge after it, but the creature's agility through the trees makes it nearly impossible to keep up. With a sharp focus, Turan launches the projectile, a streak of light cutting through the dim forest air. The mana-charged stone zips past Mesa, who flinches as she feels the sheer pressure of the shot. The impact is devastating. The stone hits the monster's head with the force of a cannonball, shattering its skull and sending blood and teeth flying. Stunned by the sudden, violent intervention, Mesa and Marvin skid to a halt and look back toward the trail. There stands Turan, his hands still raised and a faint glow of magic lingering in the air around him. He looks on with a steady, unwavering resolve, having proven that he's more than just a scholar in a library. The monster is blasted back by a sudden impact. Valtaz's daughter screams for the creature to die as she prepares her next move, but it's Turan who steps in, unleashing a torrent of flame from his hand. A massive fire dragon erupts, incinerating the beast in an instant. The resulting explosion lights up the entire forest as the others watch in awe. Coin Parkas. Turan reflects on the raw power of the fire, realizing it matches the legendary bloodline ability of House Valtaz. With the threat gone, the group starts gathering their things and checking on the wounded. Valtaz's daughter is still full of energy, mentioning how the close call gave her chills. Marvin Valtaz jokes about her screaming earlier, which only earns him a sharp glare. The soldiers scramble to find bandages and medicine for those caught in the crossfire. Turan looks over the scene, glad that despite the mess, no one was actually killed. He knows this was a surprise attack by a monster, but he can't help feeling the injuries could have been avoided. He thinks about how these supposedly tough mages didn't hesitate to use weaker people as shields. Marvin notices his somber expression and asks what's on his mind. Turan just shakes it off, telling him it's nothing. Valtaz's daughter tells everyone to come over and absorb the lingering mana from the fallen monster. They stand over the charred remains, ready to take back some of their spent energy. Turan reaches out and begins the absorption process, his eyes focusing on the flow of power. He notices that sharing the mana doesn't seem to reduce the quality of the enhancement. Marvin soon hits his limit, huffing as his small mana capacity fills up. His sister watches Turan, realizing that his proficiency and capacity are way beyond what she expected. Turan stands enveloped in a green aura, calmly taking in more energy than anyone else. As evening sets in, the entire group starts the long walk back toward the castle. Marvin admits that without Turan's quick thinking, they would have never defeated that thing. Turan tells him to drop it, saying it really wasn't anything special. Marvin is still stuck on how the monster had its own search ability to track them. Turan explains that different abilities probably awaken based on the monster's physical traits. He points out that its specialized limbs and eyes were meant for throwing things and seeing through the dense forest. Marvin is impressed he figured all that out, but Turan admits he just read it in an encyclopedia. The siblings are shocked that he actually spends his time in the boring old great library. He tells them they should just ask the librarian for some easier books next time they go. The girl stops, confused, and asks what he means by a librarian. Turan just stares at her, wondering if they really don't know who manages the library. The conversation triggers a memory of the library's massive tower. He remembers returning and being greeted warmly by the library spirit. Back then, he'd been so careful about addressing nobles with the proper titles. He'd always thought her cheerful appearance didn't exactly fit the role of a librarian. One day, he finally asked how she even knew his name. She looked up at him, completely surprised by his lack of awareness. She sat on the desk, laughing at the fact that he was only just noticing. Turan realized she must have seen it on his permit from the very beginning. She grinned, telling him that her gaze reaches everywhere within those library walls. Turan wonders how he should address his new companion now that they've gotten a bit closer. She admits she doesn't really have a name, giving him full creative control over what to call her. He settles on librarian, though she playfully suggests something a bit more affectionate like, my love. She teases him about his sudden shift to politeness after days of treating her like a servant. Turan quickly backs away, telling her she's getting a bit too close for comfort. He asks if she was once a powerful wizard, but she explains she was never even human. She defines her existence as a spirit, born from the very essence of the library itself. This human form is just a convenience, a projection tailored to whatever the user prefers to see. Turan is skeptical, telling her not to make up such tall tales just to sound impressive. She lets out a yelp when he reaches out and touches her to see if she's actually solid. It feels strange to her, and she questions exactly what he's trying to accomplish by poking her mid-sentence. The library spirit finds it frustrating that she can't use her power to just kick out annoying intruders. If she could, she'd have given every person who mishandled a book a serious punishment. Turan notes that it seems even major houses like Valta's have no idea she even exists. She explains that no one before him had the right qualifications to even perceive her. Only those with a specific magical type and high enough power level can see her true form. Turan asks for clarification on what she means by type, and she explains it's what wizards call a bloodline. She suggests he ask his parents for details, then goes quiet when he reveals he's an orphan. She offers to help him figure out his lineage by performing a direct examination of his magic. Turan is caught off guard when she tells him he just needs to consent to her checking his body. Her expression turns manic as she prepares to dive deep into his magical signature. She leans in close, declaring that their connection is now officially established for the scan. After a moment, she identifies two major bloodlines, the pursuer and the hunter. Turan's eyes widen as she asks if this was a known trait of House Zahar. She confirms his bloodline is mixed, which explains his unique and varied potential. He's the result of two different powerful lineages, though one part of him is still completely locked away. She reassures him that locked bloodlines aren't rare and will naturally open as he gets stronger. Turan falls into deep thought, his mind racing with the new information about his hidden past. He thinks back to his mother, wondering if her kind and educated nature was a hint of her own noble roots. He thanks the spirit for her help, but she's already begging him to stay for another month of study. From that point on, Turan stops reading in silence and starts using the spirit as his personal tutor. She shows him how to use simple water to create a lens, allowing him to see things usually invisible to the naked eye. Learning the fundamental laws of nature in such simple terms is a total revelation for him. He learns about microorganisms and how they are the true cause behind disease and decay. She explains complex principles like the refraction of light and the generation of heat through friction. To put the new theories to the test, Turan decides to start by experimenting with the process of decay. He gently places a finger on a fresh red apple sitting on the table. Within seconds, the fruit shrivels and turns into a blackened, decaying mess. He's amazed that simply understanding the science behind the magic makes it so much more efficient. Simply changing the way he perceived the world immediately boosts his skills as a wizard. He realizes that the powerful houses likely hoard this fundamental knowledge to keep their competitive edge. The library spirit nods, finally seeing why the world outside works the way it does. Standing before the imposing library tower, Turan realizes that it is finally time for him to move on. Inside, the library spirit is struck with disbelief, her face falling the moment she hears the news. She wails and begs him to take her along, but Turan explains that the library's owner has made it clear he's no longer welcome. She collapses onto the floor in a dramatic heap, unable to handle the thought of being alone again. Looking up with a desperate pout, she offers to take perfect care of him if he just stays within the library walls. She huffs in frustration when he doesn't immediately cave in to her selfish pleading. She composes herself and advises him to seek out other ancient spirits who might possess knowledge she lacks. Turan reaches the exit and pauses, promising her that he will return to visit whenever he can. She turns away, trying to hide her true feelings behind a mask of cold indifference as he leaves. Stepping out into the world, Turan wears a confident smile, feeling more prepared than ever before. Equipped with a map he secured from the library, he begins his long trek across the continent. The map points him toward the Enkil Desert to the east, the ancestral home of House Zahar. With his next destination clear, he sets his sights on the distant desert horizon. He is determined to reach Zahar and finally uncover the truth about his parents' mysterious past. Turan is on his way to Orum, but he's in no rush. He figures if the clues about his past were going to disappear, 18 years would have been plenty of time. If they're still there, a little extra time won't make them vanish now. His quiet walk is interrupted by some noise up ahead. He hides in the brush to get a better look at what's going on. A horse named Tilly is desperately trying to fend off attackers, while her master lies unconscious. Turan notices the saddle and realizes the animal is protecting the man, not attacking him. Two figures are standing over them, and they don't look human. He keeps his eyes locked on the scene, staying as quiet as possible. These are dark elves, and the male necromancer is looking for a way to finish things. Purple energy starts glowing around his hands as he prepares a spell. Dark, bubbling sludge starts rising from the earth. Turan recognizes the necromancy from the books he's read. At first, he thinks about walking away, since he doesn't know who started the fight, but his mind changes the second he sees one of them eating a piece of human flesh. The female dark elf asks for a bite, acting like it's just a snack. Realizing he's dealing with cannibals, Turan decides he's seen enough. He activates his stealth ability, fading into the shadows of the forest. The elves are still joking around, complaining that the meat is too hairy. In a flash, Turan strikes, cutting the female elf down before she can even blink. Blood sprays across the male necromancer's face as he stands there, stunned. He's absolutely furious, his eyes glowing with rage. He orders his undead monsters. A wolf, a ram, and a bull to swarm the intruder. Something moves fast through the air, but Turan is already gone. He clashes with the undead ram, the impact shaking the ground. The necromancer is losing his mind, screaming for Turan to come out and fight. Another massive strike lands, sending dust and debris everywhere. The elf can't wrap his head around how someone can be this good at hiding. He sends his undead wolf forward, hoping it can sniff the intruder out. Golden mana starts to surge around Turan as he prepares to finish this. He just gives a cold, confident smirk. He's already moved behind them, completely outmaneuvering the monsters. He steps out of the shadows, ready to deliver the final blow. The necromancer spots him and desperately orders his pets to kill. Turan's hands move in a blur as he gathers his power. He ignites his mana, and a ball of fire forms in his palm. He lets out a massive wave of flames that engulfs everything in its path. The undead ram is completely incinerated, turned to ash in seconds. The massive bull charges through the smoke, forcing Turan to dodge. He lands hard and tries to catch his breath, realizing these things are faster than he thought. He wipes the sweat from his face, eyes darting around for the next attack. Before he can recover, the undead wolf lunges out of the shadows and bites deep into his leg. Turan kicks the undead wolf off his leg with a heavy blow. The giant bull doesn't give him a second to breathe before charging in. A direct hit sends Turan reeling backward through the trees. He hits the ground hard, coughing up blood from the force of the strike. The necromancer starts laughing like a maniac, gloating about finally getting his revenge. But he forgot about the horse. Tilly lunges forward and delivers a massive kick to the back of his head. She doesn't stop there, stomping the life out of the elf while he's down. The undead bull and wolf stand frozen, losing their direction with their master incapacitated. The elf is a bloody mess on the ground, barely clinging to life as he gasps for help. He manages to crawl a few inches, swearing that he'll kill Turan for this humiliation. Turan isn't in the mood for threats. He fires a beam of pure mana right through him. The necromancer slumps over, his blood pooling on the forest floor as he breathes his last. With their master dead, the dark energy monsters finally dissolve into nothingness. Turan stays on the ground for a second, huffing from pure exhaustion. He wipes the blood from his mouth, admitting that fight really took a lot out of him. He notices the horse standing nearby, watching him carefully. Tilly slowly trots over to him, making a soft sound. He manages a small smile and thanks her for the backup. Nearby, the unconscious traveler's eyes finally flicker open. The forest is quiet now, with the full moon shining bright above the trees. He sits up with a gasp, looking around his surroundings in a daze. He finds a silver-haired boy sitting calmly by a small campfire. Turan looks up and simply notes that he's finally awake. The man asks who he is, so Turan explains that he saved him from the dark elves. Tilly trots over to her master, giving him a gentle nudge to comfort him. Aziz is overcome with relief, hugging his loyal horse as tight as he can. Turan tells him he's lucky. That horse is a lot smarter than your average animal. The man formally introduces himself as Aziz of House Berg. Turan gives his name and asks if there was a reason those elves were after him. Aziz says there was no reason at all. They were just ambushed while on a pilgrimage. His eyes well up with tears as the reality of the situation finally hits him. He breaks down, mourning the people he lost in the attack. He explains that his servants and knights were the ones who practically raised him since he was small. Turan listens quietly, watching the fire as the man gets it all out. He asks if there were only 2 elves involved in the whole ambush. He closes his eyes and starts to focus his mana to search the area. A pulse of energy sweeps through the trees, searching for any lingering mana signatures. After a moment, he confirms that the coast is clear and no more elves are nearby. Aziz looks up and asks if Turan has any urgent business right now. He's clearly impressed by Turan's strength and wonders why someone so powerful is alone. Turan just shrugs it off, claiming he's not actually that strong. As he speaks, blue mana begins to swirl around him while he recovers his strength. Aziz is absolutely stunned by the sheer volume of mana radiating from Turan. The entire clearing is illuminated by their clashing energies as they sit across from each other by the campfire. Aziz realizes that even after he absorbed the leftover mana from the Dark Elves, Turan's natural reserves still far surpass his own. He concludes that Turan must come from an incredibly powerful noble bloodline to possess this much raw potential at such a young age. He watches the flames, wondering why someone with such talent would be wandering the wilderness entirely alone. He decides to make an offer, inviting Turan back to his home so he can express his thanks for saving his life and escorting him home. Turan grins as Aziz reveals that the Bergs are master enchanters who have served the great house of Arabian for generations. As a token of his eternal gratitude, Aziz promises to craft a magic tool that is truly worthy of a warrior like Turan. The journey through the forest is finally coming to an end. Asi stands before the small markers, wishing he could have sent his fallen men back to their homes. He turns to thank Turan for everything, especially for not mocking him earlier. Aziz admits he felt weak for crying, even though he's a noble. His father taught him that a real noble has to stand on sacrifice and keep moving forward. Turan looks at the stone marker, clearly not buying into that cold way of thinking. He tells Aces that showing emotion isn't a weakness, it's just being a decent person. Seeing he's in good company, Aziz suggests they stop being so formal with each other. He offers his hand with a grin, officially calling the young man a friend. Turan hesitates for a second, the word friend sounding a bit foreign to him. He steps forward and gives the noble a firm handshake. As they settle in, Aziz points out a heavy-looking chest and suggests they take a break. Turan eyes the box, curious about what a noble carries around in the woods. Aziz opens it up to show off a magic cold storage chest filled with a feast. He explains it keeps food fresh for a week and can even reheat a cold meal on the fly. He starts showing off other tools, like a self-pouring teapot and a disc that builds an instant shelter. He even points out his clothes, which use magic to clean themselves automatically. Turan admits he's impressed, since magic items like these aren't exactly common. Aziz laughs, promising that the rewards waiting at the main house will put these gadgets to shame. He's determined to pay Turan back properly, even if he has to make the items himself. Turan stays quiet, just watching the enthusiastic noble go on about his plans. Aziz changes gears, mentioning he's lost count of how many different spells Turan has used so far. He asks if Turan just trains constantly, or if he has some kind of rare bloodline ability. Turan doesn't say a word, keeping the secret of his power to himself. Aziz catches the hint and laughs it off, promising to stop prying into family business. He takes a guess at Turan's age instead, figuring he's somewhere in his 30s. Turan is actually offended. He's not even 18 yet. It turns out Aces is the one with the crazy youthful look, revealing he's actually 43. He's stunned, saying he never expected to find two geniuses around the same age in this world. He mentions his cousin, another young prodigy with a truly terrifying bloodline. Turan asks if she makes tools too, but Aziz explains she's a core member of the main house. The mention of the main house shifts the mood instantly. She's the Princess of Arabian, and she's already a candidate to lead the entire family. Aziz explains that great houses don't just pick the oldest child to lead, they pick the strongest relative. Dozens of family members compete, and only the best of the best gets to take over. Among all those children, Mesa was the one born with talent that stood above everyone else. She mastered combat magic in just 10 years and is already at the level of the family's top members. Turan asks if she reached that level by performing a funeral. Aziz confirms it. When an elder granduncle died, his magic power was devoured by her. Turan realizes that's how these great houses keep their absolute power over everyone else. Aces points out that they're finally getting close to their destination. Turan looks toward the horizon, his mind busy processing everything he's just heard about the world of the elite. They finally reach the lush fields surrounding their destination. Rising from the greenery is the massive white palace of Hausberg Zavalin. As soon as they enter, a woman rushes forward with a wide smile. It's Aziz's mother, the househead. Aziz gets pulled into a huge hug as his mother celebrates his safe return. Turan watches from the side, still wrapping his head around the fact that his young friend is actually over 40. A man with a stern beard, Aziz's father, steps up to remind him to keep his noble dignity in front of the staff. Aziz introduces Turan as the man who risked his life to save him in the south. The atmosphere shifts as Aziz explains they were ambushed by dark elf wraith sorcerers. The news sends his mother into a rage, and she's ready to call up an entire army to wipe out the elves. Her husband has to step in and tell her to keep it together while people are watching. He turns his attention to Turan, asking which noble house he represents. When Turan tells him he can't say, the man is visibly confused. Turan clarifies that it's not a secret, he just doesn't know. He claims to be the son of a commoner mother and doesn't know his father. Aces is floored that Turan kept his low social status a secret this whole time. The househead decides that regardless of his birth, saving her son earns him a proper reward. However, she hesitates to let a complete stranger stay in the main house, offering to put him up at a local inn instead. She explains they're currently hosting an important guest and can't afford any risks. A cold voice cuts through the room, telling her not to worry about it. Everyone turns as the mysterious guest steps into the light. It's a young woman with long dark hair and a presence that feels almost deathly. Aces recognizes her immediately as his cousin, Mesa Arabian. Turan stares at her, realizing he's looking at the Princess of Arabian. She looks pale and drained, almost like a walking corpse. It turns out she's in hiding after an assassination attempt by Zahar's vermin, the same lineage Turan is tied to. Aces is stunned that someone actually managed to strike at the heart of the main house. Mesa Arabian suspects an insider is to blame, since the palace defenses should have been impenetrable. Feeling the weight of the day, she dismisses everyone and heads off to rest. With Mesa Arabian seemingly unconcerned, the househead has a change of heart and orders the second-best guest room prepared for Turan. Night falls over the grand estate, a silence settling in that feels a bit too heavy. Turan wakes up the next morning in a room far more luxurious than anything he's ever seen. He takes a walk through the massive hallways, trying to get his bearings. He looks out over the grounds, thinking about the dangerous world he's just stepped into. Asai spots him and gives a friendly wave, noting that his guest is an early riser. Turan pauses to admire a magic lantern, noting the fine craftsmanship. Aziz tells him he makes those things for fun, though Turan quickly loses interest. Suddenly, the sky outside flashes with a blinding, crackling light. Aziz explains it's just Meza Arabian practicing her magic, as she's always a hard worker. A massive lightning storm erupts right in the courtyard, showcasing the raw power of her bloodline. Watching the strikes, Aziz admits he's a bit jealous of her power. It's like she's a god in the making. Turan narrows his eyes, curious to see just how strong the next leader of Arabian really is. Aziz asks if he wants to go take a closer look at her training. Turan is hesitant, thinking a suspicious outsider shouldn't approach a princess, but Aziz just laughs it off. Turan suspects that Aziz's true motive for bringing him along was to test his strength against Misa Arabian. Aziz doesn't even try to hide it, admitting with a smirk that he's been holding a bit of a grudge for years. He admits that he's desperate to see the normally composed Mesa look frustrated for once. They approach her, and Aziz calls out to get her attention as she finishes her practice. Mesa turns to them, her gaze landing on Turan as she wonders who Aziz has brought into the private grounds. She recognizes Turan's name but seems mostly bored, asking why they've bothered her so suddenly. Aziz playfully suggests they join in on her magic practice, reminding her of the times they used to train together. Mesa Arabian's memory is much sharper. She remembers him storming off in tears because she mastered in 2 tries what took him a week. While Aziz snaps back in embarrassment, Turan can't help but find the dynamic between the cousins amusing. Moving past the teasing, Aziz vouches for Turan's skill, claiming his magical talent is unlike anyone else's. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he proposes that the two of them should have a proper duel. Mesa Arabian stops, looking Turan up and down as she considers the challenge. Her eyes begin to glow with a sharp, crackling blue light as she begins to tap into her power. Turan feels the temperature drop and the air thicken as he looks up at the gathering storm. In an instant, the sky turns black, and violent yellow lightning begins to tear through the clouds. Mesa Arabian stands at the center of the storm, her magical pressure so intense that she appears as little more than a silhouette of pure energy. The sheer force of the storm bloodline magic washes over Turan, forcing him to brace himself against the electrical discharge. Above them, the clouds swirl in a chaotic vortex, marking the true scale of a princess of Arabian's power. Turan gasps for air, his body trembling slightly from the immense pressure of the magical aura. Mesa Arabian looks at him with cold, piercing eyes, making her stance perfectly clear. She warns him not to get ahead of himself, declaring that he is simply no match for what she's capable of. Aziz is bragging to Mesa Arabian, telling her that while Turan can't match her raw magic power, his learning speed is on another level. He continues the hype, calling the kid a magic prodigy unlike anyone he's ever seen. Misa isn't impressed. Since Isis is talking so much, she wants to see what Turan can actually do. Turan suggests a simple duel. They each try a spell the other likely doesn't know, and the fastest one to cast it wins. Aces thinks it's a great idea and asks Mesa if she's down for the challenge. Mesa agrees, but adds a condition. No innate bloodline magic, since she heard Turan doesn't even know his own yet. She decides to go first and taps her foot on the ground. A small sprout immediately cracks through the hard stone. Huge vines erupt from the earth, whipping through the air around them. The plants snake around Aziz, catching him completely off guard. Aziz is hoisted into the air as Mesa smugly asks Turan if he thinks he can handle plant manipulation. She tells her dizzy friend to stay put for a bit while she enjoys the show. Turan just calmly kneels down and touches the ground. He starts breaking down the logic fire is just burning and water is just extracting moisture from the air. He realizes those vines are just seeds forced to grow instantly through mana, not something created from nothing. He funnels his blue mana into the stone, and a bright light begins to glow under his hand. Mace's eyes go wide as she watches him work. Blue-tinted vines suddenly shoot out of the ground, perfectly mirroring her spell. He tells her it's his first time even seeing magic like this. The vines release asses, and Mesa has to admit that, for once, his bragging was actually right. Now it's Turan's turn to set the challenge, and Mesa is ready to see what he's got. Turan hesitates, knowing that using his true Zahar bloodline magic would basically be suicide. He reaches into some bushes nearby to find a subject for his demonstration. A small rat scurries out right into his path. Misa looks down at the rodent, unimpressed, wondering if this is just some basic animal control. Turan picks it up and clarifies that the little guy isn't the target, he's just the ingredient. Wisps of blue mana swirl around the rat as Turan begins to channel his power. The rat is drained of its life force, leaving behind a shriveled husk in his hand. Mesa locks onto the dead rat, her eyes sharp as she tries to figure out the flow of energy. Turan holds out the ingredient to her, letting her know he's done with his part. She steps up, ready to give it a shot herself. With a snap of her fingers, she calls another rat out from the shadows. The rodent scurries across the tiles, coming right to her feet. She snatches it up in an instant. Mesa focuses hard, forcing her golden mana into the tiny animal. The rat screeches as it begins to burn with the same logic Turan used. Sweat beads on her forehead as she realizes this is no ordinary spell. It's far more complex than she expected. Turan just shrugs it off, saying it was the first thing that popped into his head. Deep down, he's realizing that even a high noble family like the Arabians might not know this technique. Aces sees her struggling and suggests just calling the win for Turan since it's clearly not working. Mesa snaps, telling them to shut up because there's no way she's backing down now. The fundamental logic of causality is incredibly complex when you're trying to force a result. She strains her eyes, pushing her mana to the limit to try and match the phenomenon he just showed her. Understanding the cause of a phenomenon is the key to mastering magic and controlling mana consumption. Mesa Arabian is giving it everything she has, gold mana flaring as she tries to replicate the technique Turan just demonstrated. She locks onto the rat, her focus so intense it's borderline scary. The rodent screeches as its body begins to shrivel up right in her hand. Aziz of Hausberg and Turan watch closely, realizing she's actually pulling off the complex spell. She gasps for air, barely able to speak as she finally manages to finish the casting. But the second she succeeds, her legs give out and she collapses onto the hard floor. Aziz rushes to catch her before she hits the ground, shouting her name in a panic. Turan looks on, puzzled. Running out of mana is exhausting, but it shouldn't knock a high noble out cold like this. Mesa Arabian is completely out of it, her face pale as she leans helplessly against Aziz. Turan watches her closely, his analytical mind trying to piece together the reason for her sudden weakness. He realizes there has to be a deeper factor at play behind her physical collapse. Aziz scoops her up, calling out for a healer as he prepares to move her. He notices something disturbing. She feels impossibly light, as if she's been wasting away for a long time. She's pushed herself way beyond the physical limit of what her body should be able to handle. Later, back in her room, an older maid Mesa Arabian calls. Auntie rushes in, frantic with worry. Mesa Arabian is awake but looks drained, as Auntie explains that Aziz told her everything that happened. The maid asks if the guest did something to her, her voice full of suspicion and concern. Mesa Arabian waves her off, clutching her head and insisting the collapse was just her own mistake. Auntie brings in a bowl of soup, pleading with the girl to eat something for her health. She knows her lady skips meals because of her magic, but seeing her like this is heartbreaking. Mesa Arabian gives a weak thanks and tells the maid she'll try to eat at least a little. Once she's alone, she stares blankly at the bowl, looking haunted by her own thoughts. She picks up the spoon, her hand shaking slightly as she looks down at the food. She forces herself to take a sip, but her mind is clearly elsewhere. The taste barely registers as she stares into space, her eyes glazed over. Suddenly, a wave of terror hits her as a traumatic memory begins to resurface. She relives a nightmare of fire and suffering, with voices screaming for her to save them. The bowl slips from her hand and shatters on the floor, soup spilling everywhere. She clutches the bedsheets, her knuckles turning white as she trembles in fear. She curls into a ball, shaking from the sheer weight of the trauma she's carrying. Meanwhile, Turan is led deep into the underground temple of the crippled goddess. He finds a man standing in the center of the hall, slowly drawing a long, heavy blade. This is Haram Burke, and he looks like he's built from solid granite. Turan takes in his surroundings, noting that every wall feels like it was built to withstand a siege. Haram Burke remarks that the place is solid enough to keep anyone from even thinking about breaking out. Turan isn't sure if the guy is just bragging or if it's meant as a direct warning. He keeps his eyes locked on the warrior, tracking every subtle movement as Haram Burke prepares. The warrior takes a stance, his focus shifting entirely to the steel in his hands. Turan asks what he's doing, and Haram Burke simply replies that he's training. He delivers a strike so fast and powerful that the air itself seems to scream. The blade cuts through the silence, showing a level of mastery that goes far beyond simple physical strength. Turan marvels at the efficiency of the warrior's movement, noting how every small gesture was a perfect setup for the next burst of power. He wonders if this is what true physical training looks like, as he raises a hand to apologize for potentially being in the way. Haram Burke leans in, his gaze sharp and demanding, wanting to know exactly what Turan saw in his form just now. Turan admits that he found the display incredible, his eyes still reflecting the remnants of the powerful strikes he just witnessed. He reflects on how most nobles dismiss martial arts as inferior, preferring the ease and distance provided by magic power. To most, focusing on magical power is simply more logical, unless one is born with a bloodline specifically built for combat like the Hercules line. Haram Burke counters that trials will eventually find everyone, forcing them to confront challenges regardless of their preferences or status. He holds out a sword to Turan, offering him the cold steel of a warrior's tool with a steady hand. Turan is hesitant, reminding the man that he was considered suspicious enough to be locked up just moments ago and shouldn't be handed a weapon. Haram Burke dismisses the concern, stating that the weapon is merely a piece of iron until the right person makes it a sword, and mocks Turan's current weakness. Turan accepts the blade, staring down at the hilt while wondering what he's even expected to do with it in this state. Haram Burke watches him closely, noticing a sudden and intense change in the atmosphere emanating from the young man. Blue mana erupts around Turan as he takes a stance, his gaze hardening with a newfound resolve that matches the flaring energy of his spirit. Haram is screaming at Turan to get his stance right. He tells him to stop relying on mana and just use his body. Haram adjusts his posture, warning him that a weak stance will get him killed in a real fight. Turan is clearly pushing through the pain while Haram tells him to forget about his limits. 10 more reps, and don't forget to breathe. Orum is starting to see the potential in Turan's vessel. He explains that wizards usually neglect their bodies, thinking mana is everything. Turan is gassed, but he takes the advice to heart. The training is interrupted by a very formal-looking visitor. It's Mesa, and she's actually here to bow and apologize. She admits her behavior at the temple was out of line for a guest. She asks Turan if he can spare a moment to talk. Even back at the palace, she's still feeling guilty about the mess she caused. Turan just brushes it off, saying he's just glad everyone is okay. But Mesa's got a hidden agenda. She wants to know the secret behind that rotting magic. Turan tells her it's actually a simple concept, but he's not just giving it away. She thinks he's hiding some secret bloodline magic. Mesa isn't taking no for an answer, worried about how she looks in this situation. So, she offers a deal, a trade for one of Arabian's secret arts. Turan's interest is piqued. He's down for a trade. He explains that it wasn't magic, but tiny invisible creatures called microorganisms doing the work. Mesa is stunned. She realized she was just using brute force the whole time. She hates to admit it, but she clearly lost this round. She begs him to tell Aziz it was a draw so the guy doesn't get a big head. Turan decides it's time for him to collect his end of the bargain. He picks up a simple comb. He tells her he's about to show her a real secret art. He rubs the comb to create a bit of friction and introduces her to the profound power of static electricity. Mesa is looking at a comb like it's a legendary artifact. She's completely bought into the idea that this is some high-level magic. She suggests they keep training together every evening in the garden. Turan agrees, knowing he's just secured a very powerful training partner. Later, Turan is treated to a dinner that looks like it's meant for royalty. Aziz is losing his mind over the spread, saying even his birthday wasn't this fancy. Turan can feel the pressure. This definitely isn't just a thank you meal. The matriarch mentions that Mello promised him a powerful magic tool for saving his life. She asks if Turan has anything specific in mind. Turan asks for something defensive that can protect him from surprise attacks. The family doesn't have anything that fits the bill lying around. Mello steps up, saying he's got plenty of time to craft one from scratch. The matriarch asks how he plans to design something so specialized for Turan. Mello explains that he'll imbue jewelry with mana to create a defensive tool for Turan. It's a serious project that's going to take him a month of dedicated work. Turan thinks it might be a bit excessive, but the matriarch says her son's life is priceless. She offers him a room as their guest for the next month, so Mello can focus on the craft. Aces later admits that his mother has taken quite a liking to Turan. He knows Turan's got talent to match a princess, and he loves that the guy never slacks on training. Turan isn't naive. He knows she's just trying to recruit him into the house. Aces laughs and tells him that's her move generous gifts that leave you in her debt. He reassures Turan he won't be forced into anything, but the favors are definitely a lure. Turan mentions his plans with Mesa, but Aziz isn't hearing it. He drags him along, insisting that life is way too short to just train in a corner. He's determined to show Turan the real Zavalin, starting right now. He keeps pulling him through the streets, telling him to just relax and enjoy himself. They end up at a casino, watching the roulette wheel spin. Turan doesn't look like he's having a blast, but Aziz is full of energy. He keeps dragging him around, trying to get him to loosen up. They walk through the open-air market, which is packed with traders and stalls. Turan stops to look at a flyer posted on a nearby wall. It's an advertisement for a play about a man he's heard of before. The name on the poster is Kjorn, a legend from a couple of centuries ago. He wonders if this hero was actually something else entirely. They catch the performance, which kicks off with some high-flying stage combat. The play takes place in 2195, following the warriors of Arabian into the demon desert. The actor shouts about miracles and divine help as he slays his enemies. Aziz is clapping like a fanboy, completely engrossed in the performance. He asks Turan if it was worth coming out for, and Turan admits it was a good performance, but Turan's thinking about how the legendary knight was actually surprisingly humble. He looks at the castle at sunset, pondering if the miracles were just clever tricks. He decides that if he ever meets Kjorn, he's going to get the real story. The next morning, a very intense-looking man is staring him down from the foot of the bed. Haram Burke asks him if he got enough rest, which usually means get up. He mentions that Turan's physical condition actually looked decent yesterday, but he's not letting him slack off. He tells him to get up and follow him for training. Turan agrees, figuring a sweat session is better than just playing around. Aziz pops his head in to invite Turan to a fantastic performance today, but he stops dead when he realizes his uncle is standing right there. Haram tells him he's also heading to training and asks if the guy is coming along. Aziz suddenly remembers he hasn't recovered and books it out of the room. Turan is left watching him run, wondering why he's acting so weirdly terrified. He gets his answer when he's pinned to the floor, panting for air. Haram stands over him, demanding another rep and telling him to listen to his body. He tells Turan that his mind is letting his weak body dictate the terms of the fight. Haram finally calls an end to the session, telling Turan that's enough for now. Turan collapses onto the floor, his lungs burning as he tries to catch his breath. The veteran looks down at him, asking if he's actually tired, and a gasping Turan can only manage a weak yes. Haram tells him he's lucky to be a wizard, as doing this once is usually plenty for someone like him. He explains that an ordinary person's body starts to weaken the second they stop training, requiring constant trials to maintain strength. But for a wizard, mana acts as a permanent anchor, keeping their physical form in peak condition once it's been forged. After a short break, Haram gives a terrifyingly friendly smile and tells him he must be fully rested by now. Turan flinches, sensing the next round of torture is about to begin. Haram's grin widens as he declares that a body never lies, and since Turan is rested, it's time to move on to weaponry and combat training. The training room is filled with heavy equipment, every piece designed to push a warrior to their absolute limit. Turan lets out a yell of pure effort as he forces his muscles to work through the crushing weight of the weights. They clash swords in a high-gravity space where the slightest mistake could result in being flattened into the floor. It's a brutal start to the day. By evening, Turan transitions from physical training to magic practice under Mesa Arabian's watchful eye. She demonstrates a lightning technique using finger friction, the bolt striking the target with localized precision. Turan tries to replicate the spark, but his aim is off, leaving him frustrated as he misses the target yet again. Mesa admits that he's struggling with the fundamentals of their lightning magic far more than she anticipated. He sheepishly notes that his lack of Arabian heritage might be making the attunement to their specific magic more difficult. She finds it hard to even explain the process to him, simply wondering why he can't just point and shoot like everyone else. Their session is interrupted as Mesa senses someone approaching the private garden area. A man in travel-worn clothes walks toward them, looking like he's carrying the weight of some very bad news. Turan stays silent, watching the stranger and wondering what could be so urgent that he'd interrupt a princess. Mesa is immediately on the defensive, reminding him that she ordered everyone to stay away while she was recovering. The messenger quickly explains that the patriarch has summoned her immediately, prompting Mesa to demand a very good reason. The news is grim. Dark elves have been rampaging through the south, and 3 cities have already fallen to their onslaught. An expedition force is being assembled to deal with the threat of these shadowy, relentless monsters. Turan stares off into the distance, realizing the peace he's found is about to be shattered by the arrival of a new enemy. Mesa tells them she'll be back soon as she prepares to leave the courtyard. She lets out a tired sigh, seemingly eager to move on, but before she goes, she wants to settle the bill for that disgusting decomposition magic Turan showed her earlier. She claps her hands together to snap him into focus. She asks Turan if he's ever realized that the human body runs on electricity. The look on Turan's face says he's never even considered the idea. Mesa smirks, explaining that this knowledge is a closely guarded secret of the Arabian family. She offers to teach it to him right now as payment for his debt, and Turan agrees it would be a huge help. She explains the basics. Every time a person sees or smells something, a tiny electrical signal is sent straight to the brain. Turan listens intently, trying to grasp the scientific approach to magic. She continues, explaining that these signals are the foundation for how the body functions. This electricity flows through a complex network covering the entire body. The secret is simple. If you can accelerate those signals, your body moves and reacts faster than ever before. Turan begins to test the theory, and sparks of blue energy start crackling around his body. A sharp bolt of electricity flashes right through his eye as he taps into the network. He stands perfectly still, focusing all his mana on the internal pathways. Mesa watches him, looking a bit stunned at how quickly he's grasping the concept. Turan lets out a breathy laugh, amazed by the sudden shift in his perception. Electrical currents dance through his hair as his mind begins to race at incredible speeds. But the rush is short-lived, and he nearly collapses as the strain hits him. Mesa points out that he was way too reckless with how he spent his mana. Turan clutches his head, dealing with a massive immediate headache from the technique. Mesa doesn't stick around, launching herself into the air with a powerful burst. She calls the lesson an investment, and warns him that she'll collect on it if he finds any better spells later. She streaks away into the sky, leaving Turan behind to recover. Turan watches her go, still processing the raw power she just handed him. Later on, a massive crowd gathers in the streets of Morgan City. The air is filled with cheers of glory to Arabian as the citizens celebrate. Aces explains it's a ceremony for a dark elf expedition, though it looks more like they've already won. Armored soldiers on horseback begin to make their way through the city square. Aces' father grabs his arm, reminding him to stay composed like a proper noble. A booming voice announces that the head of House Arabian is finally making his appearance. Turan turns his attention toward the center of the square, curious to see the man in charge. A figure in a heavy cloak slowly walks forward, his footsteps echoing through the silence. This is Badal Arabian, the current head of the house, but he looks surprisingly frail. Asis whispers to Turan, noting that the man looks incredibly pale and sickly. There are old rumors that he was badly hurt in a legendary fight against House Sahar. Badal slowly raises a single hand high into the air. In an instant, the clear sky is blotted out by massive, swirling black clouds. Thunder roars and lightning strikes the ground with a force that shakes the entire city. The crowd falls to their knees, begging the Lord of Thunder to protect their bloodline. Turan watches the display from the sidelines, finally seeing the true power of the Arabian name. Asis's father presents Turan with a special magical item as they prepare to part ways. Aziz watches the exchange, promising himself that he'll reach that level of power one day. It's a braided bracelet that glows with a faint, magical hum. Aziz explains that the treasure boosts physical stamina and can be pushed even further by injecting mana. He notes that at its peak, the item can make a commoner as strong as a guardian noble. Turan examines the bracelet, knowing full well that something this well made is rare even in the great houses. The house head of Bug steps forward to address the young traveler. She makes a formal offer, asking if he'd like to join their house and stay for good. Turan turns her down politely, explaining that he's got too much on his plate to settle in one spot. The woman nods, admitting she'd already heard about his restless nature from Aziz. She tells him to just consider the offer a lingering attachment from an old woman. With the goodbyes finished, Turan starts his walk out of the estate. His eyes stay focused on the horizon as he prepares for the long road. Aziz meets him in the street, accompanied by one of the house guards. The guard pulls out a dagger and hands it over, telling Turan to take it with him. It's not a fancy weapon, but it's exceptionally sharp and built to last. Turan accepts the gift with a small bow, appreciating the extra layer of security. He gives them a final nod and continues on his way. Aziz quickly catches up to help Turan drape a heavy black cloak over his shoulders. Turan looks down at the new gear, surprised by how much they're giving him. Aziz laughs, handing over a fresh set of traveling clothes and reminding him of his old, worn-out rags. He explains that the cloak is enchanted to stay clean and self-mend if it gets snagged. Aziz flashes a bright smile, calling Turan a true friend who gave him a lot to think about. He warns Turan to avoid ships if possible, mentioning that the rough waves are a nightmare for wine glasses. Turan shares his plan. He's heading east to the Elril Desert, the territory of House Sahar. Aziz's final request is simple: stay safe and come back to pay him back for the cloak one day. Turan starts his solo journey, leaving the city behind as he crosses the open plains. With his pack secured and his new gear on, he looks every bit the seasoned traveler. He leaves the main road, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He decides to test out his new speed technique, and a surge of electrical mana ignites around him. His vision sharpens as he pushes himself into a high-speed sprint. The landscape becomes a blur as he tears through the countryside like a bolt of lightning. He covers miles in minutes, his feet barely grazing the dirt as he moves. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks, catching a strange scent on the breeze. He slows his pace, walking cautiously into a thick patch of forest. His face hardens as the smell gets stronger and more distinct. It isn't just a campfire, it's the unmistakable, sickening stench of burning flesh. He clears the trees and finds a village that has been completely obliterated. Smoke still rises from the charred remains of the wooden houses. The sight that greets him is horrific. The villagers have been slaughtered and impaled on wooden spikes. Turan stands amidst the bodies, wondering if this was the work of a bandit raid. But he knows the truth. Common thugs don't do this, and the Dark Elves shouldn't have been able to get this far inland. Searching through the wreckage of a house, Turan finds a hidden floorboard. He grunts as he shoves a heavy wooden cabinet aside to reveal a secret entrance. His eyes narrow as he peers into the dark, cramped space below. Deep in the cellar, he finds a young girl huddled in the shadows. The child is trembling violently, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Turan immediately raises his hands, his voice soft as he tries to reassure the terrified survivor. Once she calms down slightly, he asks her to recount the events of the massacre. His expression darkens when the girl mentions a mage who single-handedly slaughtered the entire village. Overcome by grief and exhaustion, the girl collapses onto the cold stone floor. Turan gently lifts the child into his arms, relieved to find she is only unconscious from the stress. He steps out of the ruins, determined to find a safe place for her before investigating further. Suddenly, the sound of a bowstring being drawn rings through the air, and a blue light ignites. Turan looks up, his instincts screaming as a voice calls out from the wreckage. He finds himself at the business end of a glowing energy bow, held by a blonde woman who has him surrounded. The archer girl's face is a mask of fury as she demands he drop to his knees immediately. Mistaking him for the one responsible for the carnage, she glares at Turan with pure hatred.